I started studying Yiddish at the National Yiddish Book Center. It was 2005, I believe. I was a Steiner intern, and I was fresh off a semester at Hebrew University. So I had studied Hebrew for the previous semester, and then I was studying Yiddish during the summer. And the Yiddish Book Center was my first exposure to any systematic study of the language, with Robbie Adler-Pekarar, Naomi Seidman, and various others who were there at that time. I mean, I think at that time the program felt pretty, I wouldn't say ad hoc, but it felt like there was a person in charge and that person was responsible for designing the program, but also winging it depending on the sensibilities of the interns. So I feel like we spent a lot of time in the warehouse. We spent a lot of time hanging out, and I think we spent a little less time focused on intellectual pursuits in any kind of systematic way. Meaning, I don't ascribe my first serious encounter with the Yiddish language at the Yiddish Book Center, mostly because of my age at that time and where I was kind of as a college student. But also, I remember it as being a place where the enormity and the richness of Yiddish culture came through immediately, because we were in the warehouse all the time sweating, like it was so hot, and it was just boxes and like piles of books on top of the boxes. It was very kind of a informal environment. And I just remember looking at lots of Soviet Yiddish literature. There were these Yiddish propaganda booklets from the Soviet Union, all about how terrible American anti-black racism was. And I remember just being absolutely like blown away that Yiddish literature in the Soviet Union took notice of politics and racial politics in the United States. I mean, I can think of that moment as like a foundation for a lot of my work, is just realizing that there was something for me in Yiddish. And I also remember other things too. I remember there being massive piles of people's tefillin. There was like a bookshelf in the office in the warehouse, and there was probably like 50 bags, velvet bags with tefillin, because people would send in the contents of their parents' houses, basically. And so there would be, Jewish ritual objects and lots of Hebrew books. I think that was something that I also noticed about the Yiddish Book Center, was that it was not only a repository for Yiddish books at that time, but there was a lot of Jewish religious literature, of Sfarim, in the warehouse. I remember, like, I actually even have I took, because that was another thing, was that Hebrew books were open to take. So I have these tractates of the Babylonian Talmud that are translated into Yiddish. They have a daf of the Gemara and then a daf translated into Yiddish on the other side. And those are still to this day like indispensable parts of my library. So yeah, I remember it being just a moment of discovery. And it wasn't until I went to Vilna and Tel Aviv to study Yiddish that I really started to encounter it more rigorously as a systematic language. Yeah.